Hi everybody, I'm Beckie Herrick. I work here at the Burton Library. I pay the bills, in case you don't know me. Today we are going to make masks to look like baseballs. The reason we're making masks that look like baseballs is because opening day is just a few days away for the Cleveland Indians baseball. So we are making the masks so we can wear them to a baseball game if you go. You receive a kit. But you have to have your own sharp scissors, because if you don't have sharp scissors, it's going to be a problem. And in your kit, you have a few things. You have a hoop. You have embroidery floss. You have a needle on a piece of felt so you can find it, and a mask that's been marked. Okay? So to get started, the first thing you have to do is you want a really long piece of floss. Now if you open the floss up like this, it's easier to unwind. If you don't do that, you could get a really big mess. Now then, if you don't have a tape measure like I have set up here, you can use a yardstick. If you only have a ruler, you could lay the ruler across the table a few times and put a piece of tape at each end so you know how long you're getting. So you need like more than 60 inches. This is 33 inches right here. And there's one length. And there's two, okay? You're not going to use, it's going to be double. You're only going to be using the 33 inches. Threading the needle might be a little hard for some people. You have to pinch your thread. You have to have a good cut on the end. That's your first thing. Make sure the cut's straight. So to thread your needle, you're going to need to have a nice flat edge at the end of your floss. And you're going to pinch it. You're going to take your needle and you're going to force the floss through the needle. You can wiggle a little bit. I'm going to do it again so you can see. Pinch your floss, take the needle, and force the floss through the needle. There's 6 strands to this floss. You want all 6 of them through. If you only get 5, it's going to turn it into a big mess. So you're going to line your 2 ends up. Don't worry about where the needle is for right now. I find it easier if you lick your finger and put the floss around once, give it a little spin on your finger, pinch it, and pull it through. You get a really nice tight knot. I don't know if you can see how nice and tight that knot is. Okay. Now then, this mask is 2 layers, and we are only going to embroider the top of the mask. There's only embroidery on the top, not the back. Okay? You do have to have 2 knots on the back because you don't want your knots on the front. And the reason that we're only embroidering the top is because we want to keep the integrity in the mask intact. The point of having a mask on is so the virus doesn't get to your mouth and nose, and if we went all the way through, I'm afraid it would cut that down too much. And I believe once you wash this, it's going to tighten up around the thread, so I would wash it before I wear it. This is the way the mask orients. This is the top, this is the bottom. I'm going to start at the top. First thing you're going to want to do is open up your hoop and not go too far. Now, there may be something built into the hoop so you can't undo it too far. This one gets a little tight when it gets towards the end. If you undo it, you might have a hard time getting the threading back into the knot. So don't go too far. So you take the plain part and put it underneath, and you don't want it like this so the hoop all disappears. You want to be over like this a little bit. It will work because you're going to stretch it. The point of the hoop is to stretch what you're working on so you have a smooth surface to work on. You're just going to have to work with it, pull it around a little bit. Push it down. Sometimes it's going to be a little hard. This one's a little stiff. Okay, so it looks about like that. It doesn't have to be, don't pull it so hard that it's like super stretched, because that would be a problem. don't do that. And this one, see, it's so tight I can't even tighten it down. You might, if you're younger, you might need someone's help getting it into that position, but you definitely need to use the hoop, because if you don't, your stitches are really going to look funny. Okay, also in the kit there's not a thimble, because I use a thimble all the time, but there's not a thimble for this because you really don't need it, because your needle is nice and big and you can pinch it and send it through. Okay, so you're going to start on the back, and I know I'm looking on the front, but my needle's on the back, and you're going to make a little fake stitch for the first one, because if you don't add this little fakeish kind of stitch, because you don't have a dot to start with, it's going to look like you missed a thread on the baseball. So I'm kind of close, all right, and I'm right up under that hem of the edge of the mask. Okay, the first thing you do when you pull it through, you want to look on the back and make sure you don't have this happening. So there's this loop back here. You don't want that. You got to pull both threads so it's nice and organized and tight. Okay? One of the things you're going to have to do is keep these two threads going in the correct direction. So now you're going to go to where the black line is, and from now on we're going to only work on the front. So you wiggle your needle a little bit, get it in between, head for about the same place under that hem, and what you're going to do before you pull it through is you're going to flip it over and look. If you don't see the needle on that side, that's good. Okay, and then what I do is I pinch with these two fingers to stabilize that fabric and just pull it through. And see, these are becoming a little unorganized. Remember I said they had to be organized. What I do is I put my finger in, and I can pull against my finger and get them organized so that I can finish the stitch. And if it's still, see, there's a little loop there still, so I want to help the other one back out a little and pull them both so it's nice and flat. Okay, the next stitch, you're going to come right under that first one back into the line, and then you're going to go in between again to where the dot is. Okay, I'm checking it. It's not on that side. That's good. I'm going to pull it through. And I'm going to organize my thread. Whoops, got caught. Now you don't want that to happen. When you're putting the hoop on, if you don't have this here, that's better. So I'm going to take a pause a second and I'm going to fix that. I'm going to come back without this in this position. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Okay, I have moved where this is so that it's not over here. That was my mistake. Don't make that mistake. Okay, so the next stitch, you're going to go. Your goal, see how these line up like that if you do that with your needle? That's where you want to go to, right there. And you're going to wiggle the needle in between the layers at the black line, and you're headed for the dot. I'm going to check it. It's only on the front. And the thing's in the way again. I'll just make sure I move it that time. Pull it through. And go slow. If you go super fast, you're going to get a knot. Go slow. Use your finger to keep things organized. And when you make the stitches, you don't want to leave it like this, a big loop like that. You've got to pull some, but don't pull too far. You don't want to go like this either, because that's wrong. So I'm going to release that a little bit so it's nice and flat. And when you take this out of the hoop, the stitches are going to be a little looser because we're stretching the mask a little bit. So you're going to go back on that black line, wiggle in between, and I have my finger underneath, and I can feel if the needle goes too far. You're not going to poke yourself, don't worry about it. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to find the next dot. See how it's lined up from this dot to this dot? It's not on that side. I'm going to pull it through. You got to make sure the stitch is nice and flat. You can either pull the loose one, the tight one up and get them both together, or you can just go like this and just pull them to both nice and flat. So again, my goal is where these two hit. I'm putting the needle across, and where the center point is, I'm gonna wiggle in there, and I'm gonna go up to the dot, and I'm gonna check it. All right, when you rehoop, one of the things you want to do is make sure the fabric isn't too tight, because if it's too tight, it's going to be too hard to get your needle between the layers. So, I don't know if you can notice, there's a little give there. This is going to tighten up when I slip it down. I may have to fix it again, and this is stiff. Okay, see how there's some play there? It's not tight like a drum. I'm going to take a stitch and check it. And that seems to be okay. All right. All right, the last time we have to change the hoop. Now, okay, it's got some give. This time I put it in the hoop, it was a little bit looser than the other time, so I want to tell you how to keep your stitches looking correct. So I've made my stitch, and I'm organizing my thread again, and I've got my finger underneath, and I'm holding it when I'm pulling instead of just pulling, because remember, we don't want it to look like that. We want it to look nice and flat. So I'm using my fingers, pinching, to make sure things are the way they're supposed to be, because with it this loose, it wants to be a tighter stitch. One of the things I did when we were moving pretty fast is I noticed my stitches were coming out twisted. I didn't like that. So what I did is I took the threads and I went like this to make sure they weren't twisted up, and repositioned the needle. And do that as many times as you need to, because you want the threads to be parallel to each other, not twisted on each other. So this time we're going to come all the way down here, right up to where that's right under that little hem there. Start your stitch. And then we're going to go, now this time we're not going to go in between, we're going to do a knot again like we had at this end. So I'm going to go back down in on the black line like we've been doing, and I'm gonna make sure my hem isn't getting caught. It's not, you don't, I guess it doesn't really matter. You could do that if you want to. It's just easier to get through. And I got to see what I'm doing. If you stay out of that section, if you can see what I mean. Okay, so we're pulling it all the way through now. And I'm a little close to the edge to be able to do this. And for the knot, you don't really need it in the hoop. So I'm going to pop the hoop off, get the thread out. And this actually is almost a French knot. I don't know if you know what a French knot is. When you do a French knot, you go around about 3 times like that, and you go back in the same hole. Well, we're not going to go around 3 times. We're only going to go around twice. And we're going to pull the thread through to complete the knot. So I'm going around once, twice, and I've got it really tight in there. And I'm going to put my finger on it so that it doesn't come apart, and I'm going to pull it through. I'm going to keep that finger there, because if you don't keep your finger on it, it's going to come undone. Okay, and I'm going to take and snip it off. And these scissors could be better. Okay, and there you have it. You have a baseball mask.